Hello, my name is Delaney Johnson. I'm the Soil Conservation Science Director up in Farms, Jackson, Mississippi. And one of the things we want to emphasize at these workshops is the importance of our soil and water resources. And today we talked about micro-irrigation, and it is the management of water on a small operation that will help benefit not only the environment, but also water quality, water quantity, and also the soil itself, and also the plant life that depends upon water and water sources for growth and development. It is our food and fiber that we rely on, and this is one of the courses that we really would like to have the producers. The producers are our target audience, and getting them to have a better appreciation for our water resources and the management of it will help enhance the efficiency and use of that resource. And it is a resource concern that is in Mississippi, water quantity and water quality. And we, as a partner with the USDA, are in line to help accommodate that need of our limited resource farming community. And we have an audience today that are interested as beginning operators, limited resource issues that would really benefit the overall production and efficiency of the operation of small farming operations in Mississippi. And we thank y'all for allowing us to be a part of that process. Thank you.
Chris Friedman with Irrigation-Mart, and just here today speaking on micro-irrigation. And I think if there was one thing that I want everybody to take away from is that this is not a daunting task, and that there are tools and people that are out here to help you lay this out, design it, and give you the technical help that you need. It's complicated, but it is very doable. I am the Arkansas rep, but you can contact the main store, which is in Ruston, Louisiana, and the easiest number is 800-SAY-RAIN.
Well, good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing today? Welcome to the Pineywood School Farm. We are here today to do a workshop on micro-irrigation. So anyone expecting the neuroscience workshop, I think you're in the wrong place. Are we all here for micro-irrigation? Okay, good. We're all in the right place. Great. Thank you guys for being here today. We are blessed to have some wonderful presenters. We have Chris Friedman from Irrigation-Mart, which is based in Ruston, Louisiana. But he came down here from Arkansas to do this for you guys today. And we have Delaney Johnson from Up in Farms. My name is David Watkins. I'm with Up in Farms, and we're doing this workshop through a grant from NRCS that's given to Piney Woods and Up in Farms, and NCAT, which is the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And we've been working to develop a number of workshops for y'all, and to provide this content so that we can video record this content as well and put this online for you so that this can be an ongoing reference for you. So there's a lot of, I'll just give you a quick agenda of what we're going to do. I'm going to hand it over to the guys, to the experts, and they're going to come up here and give a little presentation. Then they're going to break out some toys and go through that and talk about what those things are and what the parts and pieces are. Then we're actually going to go out and do a little demo on the farm about setting up some micro-irrigation, understanding what those parts are. Then we're going to go for lunch, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to have another follow-up session where I'm sure you're going to have a lot more questions at that point based upon what you've seen and what you've learned so far. And suddenly you'll be, oh, but what about this? What about this? And please, we're here to help. So specific questions about your farm that you may have, if we can't help you with everything today, then we're here after today as well. We are here as an ongoing resource for you to call upon so that we can help you with your irrigation, but your other conservation and production practices as well. Okay? So thank you guys. If you have questions, please raise your hand, jump in at any time, and we will come to you. This is for you, so ask all the questions you need to get all the information you need. All right, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over here to Delaney and Chris.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Good morning again. Glad to see everybody here today. We have better weather to work, and we also have shade right now. We're going to get out and get it warm in a few minutes there. And we're going to talk about irrigation. Irrigation consists of water, and water is the lifeline of us as humanity, as the earth revolves, as the animals have need, as we as humans have need for survival and sustainability in this life on earth. So we're going to share with you a better understanding, a better awareness, and a better appreciation, because water is natural and is also artificial, how it's delivered to our sustainability for food and fiber. And you know, we as in the agricultural community, we are interested in food production. And without water, there will be no food. There will be no plant life. And ultimately, there will be no human life. So we have to rely on that, understand and appreciate it. And we really would like to have your participation today. It's going to be interactive. We want you to interact, and there's no question as a question that don't make sense or a silly question, because everybody's here to try to glean what they can, and not only just hear, but take it back home with you and apply it. That's the whole end game. Not just listen to it and then take it and harbor it and keep it to yourself, but take it back home and apply it. Okay, and then Chris, you want to have anything you want to say? And I'll get started with my presentation.
Yeah, so first off, thank you guys for being here, and thank y'all for having me. I think Delaney kind of hit a lot on the head there. You know, we can plant crops, but without water, they're going to die. And just like us, without water, we will eventually wither away. So it's very important to have irrigation, and there's all different types and systems and ways to apply that water to your soil and to ultimately your crops. So, you know, I brought some gadgets and toys here today that is kind of focused more to high tunnels and things like, and small production, but the same products are used on a larger scale to bigger production. So, but I'm sure we'll get into all that here in a little bit. I'll let you do your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So what we're going to discuss today is irrigation is a large area of discussion, and we want to break it down. We got into compartments, and today we as small farm producers, we're going to talk about the micro-irrigation part. It's three types of irrigation, but today, like I say, we're going to focus on micro-irrigation. And we had the Piney Woods school system, and this is their farm, and this is where our site location is to do our primary workshops. This is the beginning, because there's so much in agriculture that we have to understand in order to get the developmental, the preliminary infrastructure in place in order to have a successful program. And this is one of them. Irrigation defined. It's the practice of controlled amounts of water to land to grow crops. It's the practice of applying a controlled amount. Control meaning what? It's not naturally. We are intervening. We are interfering with the natural flow. But we have it for a intended purpose. The intended purpose is to get water to a local area, to the plant, in order to be efficient. And we're going to talk about efficiency as we move forward. But in order to be more effective, if you don't have but a certain amount of resources, you want to get it to where it needs to go. You don't want it to just go anywhere and it find its own way there. You want to have a control system on how to get the water where it needs to go. And the watering of land by artificial means to foster plant growth. We said our food and fiber, that's our life. That's our life and sustainability. We want to get the water in an efficient manner to where it needs to be in order for it to be effective and be able to do what we intended for it to do. That's to help plant growth, help plant life. And we also see some of the lines that are right next to this line in the picture to the right, and that is a line that conducts water to where we want it to go. It's not just sprinkling over the whole area, but it's going directly to and nearest to the ground where the plant roots are closest to. Everything is in close proximity. Everything in close proximity, we say micro. We're not gonna say macro, large areas, but micro, getting it to where it needs to be. That's the whole key to the whole scheme of micro irrigation. Types of irrigation. We have surface irrigation, that's gravity application. Anytime you have water that goes on the ground, and then it gotta go, it's going down. Some of it's going down, some of it's going back up, what we call, we get to in a minute. That's a term for it. And some of it is gonna run off. And the plant is gonna take some. The plant is not gonna take up 100% of the water that goes on the ground. Okay, we know that it's gotta share like anything else, you know. Like growing up in life, you had a family, you had 6 or 7 siblings, you had to share something, then you can't just hop it all, eat everything on the table there. You got to get, some of it got to be shared with your siblings. So that's the same way it is here. The plant is a ecosystem. We talked about that a few weeks ago. The ecosystem, it's a system where you have all life, plants, animals, air, water, enduring in a certain location, proximity. They all have a mutual benefit, but they all have to share in order to function properly in that ecosystem. Okay, then we have sprinkler irrigation. It's like when it rains, it mimics a rainfall. Then water comes down from the sky and atmosphere and falls down to the ground. All the water does not hit the ground, like they say. But in a heavy conduit rain, all of it hits the ground, then some of it goes into the ground, some of it runs off, and some of it is taken back up, what's left. So it's a water cycle, more or less. So the plants have to share, and they have to have some of that water that they need in order for their livelihood to sustain and put on growth. But the sprinkler system is more like a rainfall assimilation and stuff. Okay, now you have micro-irrigation, where you have the droplets right closest to your plant, and it really interacts with the soil itself. It is not wasted. It's getting close to the plant roots, and then therefore you have that opportunity for the roots to take up more water that it needs in order to sustain and be healthy. Once you use the micro-irrigation system for frequent application of small quantities, frequent application, not once a week or every other week, but once a week, because you put it out in small quantities. You know, you feed a little baby, you feed them by the spoon and stuff. You don't put the whole bowl down the mouth at one time because they can't digest that. So you have to do it in little droplets, and therefore you have an equal share. Nothing is wasted. You know, like you had your family, you grew up and you had a table. Everybody, if you had a family of 6, probably you had 7 pieces of chicken. You know, you didn't do 20 pieces of chicken. You had just enough for everybody to get some, and stuff. So you want to be able to distribute efficiently, and everybody knows what they need in order to sustain. And that's what we as producers need to understand. We need to provide enough moisture, and then Chris is going to talk about that in that equilibrium over a period of time, not just you ordered it this morning and then don't order it no more till 2 days later. It's a calibration we have come up with in technology where we have understanding the nature of plants and their root uptake. We understand how much quantity of water needs to go down to the ground and goes into the ground in order for plants to have adequate access to it. And it also is based on the type of soil, the soil textures, the soil structure, and all that goes into play as far as that calculation on how to water and irrigate a field, a crop, in order for it to be maximized, not just wasted, not just go as runoff, because runoff, you got another problem on your hands, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But as the soil surface and stream of minute to a spray through the emitters an application placed on the ground and the delivery line. So I'm going to move on, but I just want to expose you to it because Chris will be discussing that in more detail in a few minutes. You may have seen these irrigation systems driving down the highway, right? You've seen these big pivot systems. Then they spray and water just don't look like it's moving. But actually this system, it moves. You see those wheels down there on the ground surface, they move. They're calibrated to move back and forth and provide that irrigation throughout that field, throughout that area. But there's a lot of waste we've come to understand that takes place with this type of irrigation. So in order for us to be small, limited resource producers, what do you mean limited? We can't afford to put down this type of water and it goes run off, it don't get any use. It's not going down the ground and filtrating and providing plant growth and moisture. So we have moved on, and we also see in a greenhouse where we see that misting, like a rainfall effect water coming down. But a lot of that is evaporating, going back, and it's not getting, and for sure, a lot of it is not getting to what? The roots. It's not getting down to where it needs to be. So you got some runoff opportunity there, and you have a system of waste. And if you're paying for water, you're on a municipal water, you got well water. Anyway, there's some waste taking place there. So we are trying to encourage small limited resource producers to opportunities that would help maximize the water that you do have and be less wasteful. And then you're going to see a really benefit in your bottom line with this operation as far as your water management. Okay, efficiency. Efficiency is supply, irrigation, and rainfall, and maintain the soil moisture for plant growth. Okay, it prevents contamination of groundwater. This practice applies to sites, topography, slope, and irrigation of crops that is desirable vegetation and adequate supply, suitable quantity of water available for intended purposes. So, in order for it to be efficient, it has to have an intended purpose. It's not just, I'm just going to water, I'm going to irrigate because that's the way my granddaddy did it, that's the way my grandfather did. I saw them do it, so I'm going to do the same thing. We'll come to understand that was good at that time, and it helped. You know, we here still living as adults and to this day. But at the same time, when you know better, you do better. And we have technology, we have applied understanding, the better education and understanding now on how water dynamics work in soil. Because oftentimes we had runoff on our soil properties, and it induced what? Erosion. You got so much water, then you got erosion effects and stuff. And erosion, that's not good because what? It rushed away your topsoil, for one thing. Okay, then that soil, when it washed off, had to go somewhere. So when it went down into your streams, it made your streams impaired because it put other sediments and stuff in your stream that shouldn't have been there. And it just was not good for the environment. It was not good for a successful farm operation, and it was not good for us as humans as far as our well-being and health. And so we look at efficiency and effectiveness.
Interject for a second. Another thing is with that erosion and that water runoff, you're losing your fertilizer, all your good nutrients in your soil. So,
the closer contact makes better opportunity for infiltration. Infiltration is a downward movement of water into the soil. Okay, and you want it to get down to where the plant roots are most optimum to absorb it, to take it up. Okay. And you want it to stay there for a while, not just go right down through it. You want to stay there long enough for the plants to roots to take it up. Okay, so it's a downward movement. Okay, then percolation, it's the saturation of that area. It's not just a downward movement. Make sure all those pore spaces and particles are saturated or coated with moisture in order for plants to have time to roots. You see roots in a crop, and some roots you can't even see. They're called fibrous roots and stuff. So they're actively sucking up water. But the water moisture has to be available, and it has to be at the right optimum pressure in order for plant roots to suck it in and stuff. So therefore, it has to be in a soil for a certain period of time, and you have different types of substrate textures in the soil. You have sandy soils, you have clay soils, you have loamy soils. And each one requires a different type of water infiltration rate. And you have to understand that dynamics. You can't just go out and water the same textures with the same amount of water in the same period of time. You have to understand what you have as far as your land resource. If you're in Hines County, if you're in down on the coast, kind of in the sandy soils, or if you're in the up in the northeast, you got loamy soils and stuff. So you have to understand your soil types in order for it to have an effective program.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So does that mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is you have to infiltrate before you percolate.
Right.
Or is that right? That's not right. The water you have to get the water down into the roots, down into the soil, but you want to do it in such a way so that you're filling up the space down in the soil with water, so that it's not just kind of go down and go through it, but there's empty space down in here, the pores, where the roots are inside the soil, and you want that to be filled up with the water, so that the plants have a better chance to uptake. Is that right?
Right, that's it. And you don't want this zone to be just waterlogged. You don't want just water in this zone. You want it to be more or less capillary water, where it's moist enough that it's not free water. You want to have it in, closed in with the pores, and you want it to be in a moisture state that plant roots will be able to take it up. Because plant roots, you'll drown the roots if it's saturated. You know, in the areas where you have wetlands, wet ponded areas, where you see your plants die because they are suffocating, because they have the water is a certain level rate where it's loose water, free water, and that's not what you want in soils when you're trying to crop it. You want it to be a water that you have in your capillary fringe and your pore spaces. In order to have that, you have to have that right rate of infiltration, like they were saying, and then you have what we call percolation, where it surrounds all these pore spaces. It surrounds all these soil particles. Water is surrounded, so therefore your plant roots and the soil particles come in contact. They have that relationship with each other, and that's why we talk about no-till, minimum till, and no-till soil health practices, because that's what that is gearing toward. Have that root system where you have your moisture, your microbial activity, your temperature. Everything needs to be optimum in order to have good plant growth. And Chris, you have something.
Yeah, the best way I've always heard that explained, kind of what David was asking, is just picture a bowl full of marbles, and then you put water in there, right? Those marbles, that's your soil. That's your soil particles in there. And that water's got to kind of just make its way all the way down and around every bit of that. And and like Delaney's saying, we don't want it where the bowl is overflowing, because then there's no air, and that's where you drown the plant. It's just like holding your head under the water. Eventually, it's not going to be good. So, so the best way to kind of think of that is just like a bowl full of marbles, and then you pour a bottle of water in there. You don't want it to be overflowing out of the bowl, but you do want to see all those areas filled with water.
Right. Infiltration, transpiration, evaporation, percolation, and runoff. Each one of these terms have a significance in the whole scheme of the water dynamics and the water cycle. Like we said earlier, you're not going to have 100% root uptake. Whenever water drops and gets into the infiltrates down into the soil medium, it's not going to be, well, I got 100%. So no, you're going to have waste in anything. So even like I say, when we are doing anything, if we have man has any type of use of any type of resource, it's going to be some waste involved. Okay, so in same thing in nature and stuff. But like we said earlier, sandy soils, if you have infiltration rate of, you're going to expect 0.74 to 1 inches per hour of infiltration. And looking at the clay soils in comparison, you're going to have a third of that inch of infiltration going downward movement, vertical downward movement into the soil. In loamy soils, you're going to have probably a half an inch in an hour's time. So that gives you a kind of indication on just what the difference is in different types of soils you're working in. Okay, and then you're looking at transpiration, you're looking at some infiltration, you're looking at some going to your plant roots. Your rainfall, you're looking at evaporation, we said earlier. That's going to take up some of your water that you irrigate. So you got to account for that, and Chris will explain that to you. Okay, percolation, that's going on down, and trying to find that water table. Okay, one thing about water dynamics, water is always trying to find other water. It's looking for something. You know, like you see in the animal world, in the animal kingdom, you see insects. They're not just moving around. They looking for food. They're looking for something. So anything in the hydrology world, water is trying to find other waters to get to the nearest stream, to get to your creeks, to get to the Big Black, to get to Bayou Pierre, to get to the Mississippi River, to get to the Gulf Coast. It's going trying to find some way to get to where it wants to be, where other bigger waters are. So you're looking at this, and you're looking at the plant root, you're looking at transpiration. You have lots of transpiration moisture going up from your plants in order back into the atmosphere. You have infiltration, like we say, going down, but in the meantime, you want this zone right here to be able to draw as much water as necessary for that plant to grow. Okay, you don't want to overlog it like Chris was saying, but at the same time, you want it to be there when it needs it. You don't want your plant to have to suffer or wonder where it's going to get its next drink of water from. It needs to be there when it's necessary and when the plant needs it to maintain growth. The whole objective is to put more growth on. That plant don't need to be worrying about where it's going to get its nutrients and food from. It needs to be there at all times in order for you to get your maximum yield and production and health, in order to get it to the market on time so you can eat it on time. So you want to make sure you got that balance in place, okay? And the other thing is, we'll be committing a sin that we didn't talk about soil health. We wouldn't be, we'd be shorting ourselves. We couldn't go home today, Chris. We left that out there. But anyway, soil health. Okay, how it impacts plant growth, plant health, soil health. You see these little microbes in the soil. You see some of them, you can look at them from the naked eye. Some of them you have to have a microscope to see. But they're all in that rooting system. They're all in that rooting zone. What are they there for? They're not there to really help the plant. They're there for their own interest. But in other words, the plants are benefited from their being there. The plants are benefited from these microbes being there because they collect moisture also, and that gives them mobility in order to move around, be mobile in this rooting zone. Okay, and another thing, they are manufacturing and generating natural nutrients. They are converting organic material, debris, plant matter, roots. They're converting it from inorganic to organic material that the plant roots can be able to take it up. So, but you need that moisture, you need that system in order for them to behave and interact, in order to generate nutrients and make the nutrients available to the plants. And at the same time, you have that moisture content there in order for them to be mobile and also for them to have a atmosphere, environment for them to be comfortable in. You can't just have a drought like we had here the last few months, and they go dormant too. They can't function either, you know. Microbes need water too, like I say, life. Soil is a dynamic, natural living system. What part of the soil is living? It's not the sand, silt, and clay. It's these microbes that's the life of your soil. We say it's a living system. Okay, and one thing in order to do that is for the temperature, the conditions, keep your soil covered. Like we said, everybody, most people out here today got hats on, right? If you're going out in the sunlight, you have some hat on to keep your head. So you're gonna keep the soil covered. One of the reasons we keep the soil covered in the soil health world is to maintain a decent, proper temperature. The soil don't get too overheated. If the ground gets overheated, what's gonna happen here? It's going to get overheated in that temperature, and it's going to become an incubator more so than a food generator because the heat conditions. So you have to keep the soil covered, and also you retain moisture and keep it from going back to the atmosphere. Okay, have a diversity of plants. All these critters, they don't like tillage radish. Some of them may like other types of roots from plant roots. Maybe vetch, some partridge pea. some type of clover, but all of them don't care for tillage radish. So you got to have a mixture, a cocktail, you know, like at a what you call that, a restaurant, a buffet. Yeah, you got to have a buffet there. You know, some people, you might like one thing, a piece of dessert, you might like another piece of dessert. Well, everybody's satisfied. You know, everybody's satisfied when they leave. You know, so that's the whole dynamics and stuff. Okay, reduce traffic when wet. That means you don't want to pack with traffic, because what are you going to do? You're going to reduce your pore space. You're going to reduce your compaction. Then you're going to reduce all the opportunity for the mobility for your organisms to be mobile, and then you're going to restrict your root development and all that stuff. So you want to try to stay off of that with your equipment or traffic to the extent possible.
You're saying reduce the traffic. You mean it needs to stay moist so they can move around? What are you saying?
Reduce like cars and equipment.
Oh, okay.
So compaction, it packs it. Then you reduce that, making it so tight that they can't,
Okay.
your microbes can't move around and stuff, and your roots get jammed. They can't penetrate like they're supposed to. So, okay, and maintain our active biology. Make sure you got these critters are happy in their work, in their livelihood. This is their environment. This is their system. You keep them happy. You got happy plants because the plants are getting the nutrients they need, and they're interacting with the root systems and stuff, and everybody's benefiting from it. You know, you give off carbon, so they take in the carbon, and then they generate. Then they help produce nitrogen, nitrates, and stuff. So everything is being fed. Everything is going on at the same time, even stuff that we can't see. We can't see what's going on, but it's life just continuously going on at the same time. Even in our systems, that it's always something going on. It's not staying static. It's something that's taking place. Smart fertilizing. Okay, that's another term that we use. We incorporate it. Smart fertilizing. What? Try to minimize the use of artificial amendments, artificial fertilizer from the vendor, from the company. What you're going to do? You're going to spoil the natural system here. You got fertilizer all up around the top up here. Then your plants, then they're going to start being attracted to that commercial fertilizer. Then they're going to put your natural system out of check, because they kind of like no longer necessary. And then your roots are not going to come down here when they can get. Why go to Jackson when you can get a honey barn up there at the convenience store? You know, you ain't got to go to Jackson. So you're going to stop right here and get everything nourishment you need. Unhealthy foods, we can come down here and get some good food. Go to Jackson, get some good food and good quality fiber that's going to make you healthy and stuff. So what we want to do is reduce, be smart about it. Don't over fertilize with commercial tillage. Try to let it work natural. If you let things work natural, they're gonna really start being self-efficient, self-sustaining. When a baby's trying to walk, you don't just hold them the whole time. You want to let them fall a few times. You know, let them feel the ground. Then that's where you're gonna start walking. But as long as you hold his hand and try to walk them, you handicapping them. So let the nature do what it wants to do. It's going to do it, but man always want to help them out, right? We always think we got to help something. You got to help him and stuff. But then, you know, when they need help, it's not there. But, you know, that's the whole dynamic message in this system right here. Then zone application, a low pressure irrigation system and sprinkler system. The whole outtake from that is micro-irrigation. We talked about earlier, put the water where it's going to be intercepted or used the fastest, the quickest. Don't just do the aerial sprinkler system where you've got small acreage. You don't need that. Put the water with the micro system that we're going to talk about further today, is putting the water right down there closest to the ground where the plants don't have to wait on it to come to it. You're putting it right there, applying it right there, the moisture of your water. So you got greater opportunity, quick opportunity for irrigation to take place, and you do not have to wait have to, I guess, risk the opportunity for runoff and water get not used or wasted, and it goes off into the system. Then you got to irrigate again. You got to apply more water. So we're looking at zone application is putting the water down closest in proximity to the plant root on the ground where it needs to be so it can get it the quickest. Okay, then this is an area out there on the field out here. We have time, we'll look at it today. We're gonna walk and stuff. And what we wanna do, edge of field effects of edge of field. What we see, okay, irrigation, we talked about runoff. If you have runoff, you're gonna have some degree of runoff, okay? But you wanna try to contain it because what does it do? It builds up out here, and with water, if you did it in the fertilizer, what fertilizer going? It's going into the field too. And where the grass is greener here than it is out there in the field, right? So where did your fertilizer and stuff go? It went out there and ran off out there in the field. So this is something you want to try to prevent to maximize population. You want to try to, like I say, efficiency, put just the water down that's necessary, and it will be absorbed based upon your soil texture. Well, it's sand, silt, and clay. You have different rates. And if not, it's going to be runoff to the edge of your field. You're going to have a better crop out here on the outside your field border than you will inside your field border. So that's what we're talking about: efficiency and maximizing the resources water resources that you do have. And then the other thing about that is it's going to run off when it runs out the field. In a heavy rain, what it's going to do? Run on down out the field, on down the hill. And inside those trees, there's a tree line, there's what? A creek, maybe a creek. Okay, it's made from your field, through your edge of field, all the way down into your creek bottom, and what it does do when it get down there? It causes your streams to become impaired, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you got that whole effect, what could have been avoided if you had been efficient in how you manage your water resources. And micro-irrigation for small resource, limited resource operations is the best way to go about it as far as trying to be a good manager. Okay, and this is something we're going to look at a little later on today. It's a high tunnel, and it's an operation where you lay down your lines and you install your water lines and stuff in order for your micro systems and stuff. Okay, we'll look at that a little bit today, and Chris will explain more to you about that. But anyway, the takeaway is efficiency. Efficiency. That's what we're looking at. I mean, if you have, and like I say, we have a budget that we work on and stuff, being efficient with our money management, efficiency with our water resources. Efficiency means you have some more for tomorrow, you have some more for the next day, and but if you burn it all up today, then you ain't gonna have, you gotta go back and hunt some more for the next day. Okay, micro-irrigation systems use 20 to 50% less water than conventional sprinkler systems, what we looked at, okay? So that makes a difference. That means something right there. 20 to 50% less water, and then you're getting a better outcome. You're getting better plants because your efficiency, you're putting the water where it needs to be, then not as much going back in the atmosphere, not as much runoff, so the plant is getting what it needs in order to grow, and you're getting a better healthy plant crop, and also you're getting a healthy food and stuff. So, and you're getting a better price at the market for those who are in this selling. Okay, and the small farm cropping irrigation use water. Okay, so that's helps to get us past that introduction part of micro-irrigation and water management. And have any questions? I think the way we have it set up for time, for the sake of time, we're gonna get those questions answered later on, and we're gonna ask Chris if he would come up now and tell us what he knows, and
yeah,
it's a lot. We didn't say, and I know it takes a while, but just tell us something.
Yeah.
Something.
So,
Thank you.
So first off, I just want to, again, say thank you for being here. Delaney hit a lot there, and there was a few things that I wanted to kind of go back and pick up on, especially that last slide there, where what I want you to realize there is he was saying 20 to 50% less irrigation water, and that's because you're being more efficient with your irrigation water. We still have large water requirements depending on the size of the farm, but when you're using your water more efficiently and putting it out uniformly, you don't have the runoff, you don't have the waste. So the pumping and the cost of the water pricing, you know, you save on those. That's where your savings is. And of course, we're not using our natural resources more than what we need to. I'm not sure about this area, but there are a few areas in Arkansas where I'm from where, you know, the groundwater is starting to be a real issue. And it's in areas where large farms are pumping lots of water. And so they're looking at being more efficient. I brought some stuff here today that I want to break out, but before I do, I kind of also want to hit on, like Delaney said, there's several types of irrigation. There's, you know, surface water, there's sprinkler, and there's micro. And micro most of the time is a thin product that most people call drip tape. That's kind of what it's been dubbed through the industry. And then you also have that same product with a thicker mill, which has been dubbed kind of drip hose. I brought a few pieces of drip tape here that you guys can pass around and kind of look at. And in this product, this is what we call drip tape. It's a thin wall product. This one's a 15 mil. This is what's real common in vegetable production. And this one actually has an emitter that's welded in. You can see that long rectangle. That's actually, the water will pass through the backside of that emitter, run down its little pathway, and comes out that little horseshoe cut that you see on that drip tape there. And that's how it works. It seems super high tech, and I'm sure there is to try to figure out that pathway, but that's basically how drip tape works. And again, drip hose would be the same thing. The emitter may look different from different brands and different tubing, but it's basically the same thing. The drip hose would just be a heavier wall product, so it wouldn't lay flat like this. It'd be round like your garden hose. Most of the time you see drip hose in fruit production, like peaches and blackberries, something where that drip irrigation is going to be out there for a long time, 15, 20 years. Most of the time drip tape, depending on the mill thickness and what the crop is, it may be there just seasonal, it may be there for a couple of years. We do have some drip tape on some agronomic crops like cotton that have been out there 15, 20 years. And it's still holding up, but it is buried in the soil where it's protected from rodents and damage of equipment. Most of the time in fruit and vegetable production, this is a seasonal. Whenever you're done for the year, it's pulled up. It can be rolled up and used from time to time, or you can just discard it in a recycle or whatever you could do in your area. So a lot of recycling places will take it. So, like I said, there's a lot of different.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I was just, he answered really one of the questions,
Okay.
but I was going to ask, the width, is it like you order it by a certain amount of length or?
Sure. Yes, good question. So it does come in a roll. The smallest roll that we carry is a 1,500 foot roll, and the largest roll is like a 9,000 foot roll on the drip tape. Most of your drip hose is either going to be 500 foot to a roll or 1,000 foot to a roll. And a 1,000 foot roll is about the size of a truck tire. You know, it's about that tall and about, you know, it's a big rolled up tube. There are different spacings and different flow rates. And kind of going back to what Delaney was talking about soil, if you have a sandy soil, we may go with a lower flow emitter so that water just doesn't blow right through that profile. And if it's a heavier soil, we may go with a higher flow. You know, we'll match those emitter flow rates to what your soil type is. And again, with the spacing, probably a super common spacing, especially in fruit and vegetables, is 12 inch. But there are 16 inch spacing, 30, I mean, there's all different kinds of spacing. And again, we would look at what your crop is and what your soil profile is and kind of go from there, and we would pick out the right one for you. Most of your high tonal productions or whatever, they're going to use a 12 inch medium flow drip tape. because that's a super common in those small high tunnel type irrigations. Yes,
So
ma'am.
do you have to plant the plant near each one of those little emitters?
Very good question. You do not. And this is where the spacing comes in. That's a common misconception that people think that it needs to be right by that tubing. It doesn't. Because what's going to happen is that emitter is going to just have a small drip, basically. And that's going to hit the soil, and it's going to move side to side in the soil also while it's moving down. Like Delaney was talking about, gravity's going to pull it down, but it's also going to move out. So what would happen is if you put this in a dry sandy soil and turned it on, you would see these little wet circles. And eventually those wet circles touch. And so that whole soil profile will have moisture in it. So that you don't want to do a super wide spacing because then you may struggle with getting water to the plants. But that's why I said 12 inches is probably the most common because that handles most vegetables. Yes, ma'am. You can leave it on top of the ground, or you can put it just barely underneath your soil. We always recommend putting it barely just under your soil for a couple of reasons. When you put it in, whether you use a machine or whether you put it in by hand, you always want the emitter facing up. And that reason for that is if there's any sediment that gets in that tape, it won't clog up your emitter. But also we have a little bit of soil thrown over that because the moisture in that soil will keep any sediment from clogging up your emitter also. Yeah, and it protects it from any rodents or damage is a really major reason why we want to throw a little dirt over it. When we have it in agronomic crops like cotton or corn, we put it about 8 or 10 inches deep in the ground, and that's to protect it, number one, from rodents, but also from tractors and implements coming through the field. But in vegetables, usually it's an inch or two is thrown over the top of it. Whether that, again, done with a machine or done by hand. If you do it by hand, you could just kind of just take you into your shovel and just kind of drag you a trench, lay it in there, and then just come back and throw that soil over it. So.
How many, like on each row, how many, do you put 2 strips?
Depends on the crop. Something like tomatoes, you would put 1, and it would be pretty much just off the center of your bed. Something like strawberries, where it's a super wide bed and you have 2 plants per every foot, you may put 2 drip tapes in there and have it on both sides of the plant. If you do that, I would always recommend going with a low flow tape so you just don't saturate that soil, and it also helps with your water requirements that you're going to need. So I've said water requirements a couple of times. That's one thing that I always want to make sure of. A good rule of thumb that we use is you need 6 gallons per minute per acre. That's what your water. Now we can use more than that, but we cannot use less than that. 6 gallons per minute per acre is if you run that 24/7. So if you ran 24 hours, 7 days a week, that would put 2 inches of water on that acre. And most crops, you're going to hear it needs 1 inch of water a week or 1.5 inches of water a week. And that's how we figure that out. We figure out our flow rates, we figure out what our drippers are putting out, and then we can tell you, ultimately, we can educate a guess on how long you need to run your drip tape. Now, what I would tell you from there to make sure that you're doing it, you're getting enough water out, or you're irrigating at efficient times, we would look into doing some moisture monitoring, whether that's a small handheld device or whether that's a big fancy device that actually sends messages to your phone. Kind of goes on farm to farm and budget. So, yes, ma'am.
So if you're going to be doing raised beds and then also in ground, how do you do the determination with raised beds? What's the,
So,
because what you're talking about basically is when you have in-ground crops, correct?
yes, ma'am.
So, but then what is the difference when you're going to be doing raised beds?
It will be, we will treat it the same.
Okay.
We may look at whatever you're using for your soil in there, you know, but basically it is treated the same as a field crop. Whether it's in a high tunnel or in the field or in a raised bed, we would treat it the same.
like mulching, landscape cover, how does that impact the irrigation?
Of course, yes.
Oh,
So it's kind of like you were talking about cover crops earlier. You know, there's a couple of different practices depending on what crop you're doing. You can use plastic mulch. I think a lot of y'all are familiar with that. And what that plastic mulch is going to do is, number one, it's going to warm that soil bed in the winter times when the temperatures may be cold. And number two, it's going to keep out weeds and help hold that moisture in there. Now, what it can do, and the reason why there's different colors of plastic mulch, is when you get into the late summer when it's super hot, you can overheat that bed and you can take all your moisture out. So that's where you use the black and white mulch and you use the white side up. Now, also you could use natural mulching like bark or maybe hay or things like that. And again, that's helping keep that soil covered so it holds that moisture and that temperature in that soil. You don't have just a blazing sun on it, which is going to dry out your soil eventually. And it's going to affect all those microorganisms and everything that's in that soil. So that's why it's really important to use some kind of mulching, whether it's a natural or whether it's a plastic culture or, you know, like I said, hay or bark, if you want to use a natural product. If you use those products, just be careful where you get them from and make sure that they're chemical free and you don't have damage to your plants. That's just a little tidbit there. So.
And that could, I know it's not about the high tunnel, but that could be kind of the same when you have hedges around the house to put the plastic mulch stick on.
So in landscape, most of the time they will use a heavier fabric, like a ground cover. It's more of a woven, and that does help. It helps keep the weeds out. It also helps, same idea. And then you come back and put some natural bark mulch or something in there. The reason why we use that heavier fabric is because, like, plastic culture is thin. It's really only made to last about a season. And then you would pull it up and disregard it.
The plastic mulch you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Just use it for one season?
It's usually going to last about a season. What you'll have is you'll start to see that material, even though it's not degradable, it'll start to break down, kind of like take a grocery sack and tie it to a fence. And even though it's not degradable, eventually it just gets brittle because the sun just deteriorates it. That's what's going to happen to the plastic mulch. So eventually you'll have to replace it. That's why most of the time it's a seasonal deal.
So when you're talking about the thickness of it, I've seen where it's sold in meals, so they're
Yes, ma'am.
reference meals. So when you say the heavier, how many meals are you speaking of thickness-wise when you say as opposed to seasonal?
Okay. So most common on your plastic mulch is going to be 1 mil or 1 1/4. 1 mil is going to be the lighter, and it's probably going to last, 9 months to maybe a year. The 1 1/4, by the naked eye and by you feeling it, you would probably never tell the difference. The only way you'd really tell it is the roll is a lot heavier. That may last a little longer, but what a lot of people really like the 1 1/4 for is when they go to pull it up, it seems to hold together a little bit better. So it is a heavier roll because there's more plastic, not lengthwise plastic, but more material in the making of it. And it is a little bit more expensive than the 1 mil. So you just kind of have to weigh out those options. If you know you're going to have a short season crop and then you're going to clean everything up, just buy the 1 mil. And there are some partial mill mulches out there. If you're going to have to remove it from the field, I would tell you do not use the partial mill because you're going to struggle getting it up. You're going to be very aggravated trying to pull that up. But I have guys that spend the extra money. They buy the 1 1/4 because it's just easier for them to remove it. So personal preference.
So
on
if
that.
you want to get something that's going to last you more than just the season,
I would go towards the 1 1/4. Now, if you wanted something that you were going to have that's going to last for a long time, say if you were planting blackberries or blueberries where they're going to be in the ground for 10, 15, 20 years, then you go to that heavier product, that ground cover product that I was talking about for your landscaping, because most of that is rated by year. It's a 12-year product or a 15-year product. It has a little bit of UV resistance in there, so it keeps it from breaking down. Now, it will slowly deteriorate also, but not as fast as the thin plastic.
Okay, thank you.
So on that, there's a lot to know about irrigation. Like I said, if you were starting from scratch, the biggest thing to know is what is your water source going to be? You know, whether it's a well, whether it's off your house, or, you know, a pond, or whatever you're going to use. So knowing what that is, knowing what your requirements per acre is going to be, and knowing what your crop is going to be and what your spacing on your crop is going to be. And once you have those things, you can reach out to a company like us and we can guide you and kind of steer you in the right direction on what products you need. We have a design form that we use, that we email our customers, and it just answers questions like I just said. You know, what is your crop? What is your water source? Do you want it automated? Do you want to manually turn it on? And all those, once you answer all those questions, then we can kind of lay out a system that's for your farm. All components are usually the same. There's all the major basic components, but farm to farm changes a little bit, just like anything else. So I brought some toys here today, as David said earlier. I brought our Garden Kit 1000. This is a real popular kit that we sell. It's about $135. It's on our website. It's also in our catalogs. And it comes with pretty much everything you need to do 10 100-foot rows. So it's 1,000 foot of drip tape and 100 foot of header hose. And I'm going to open this up and kind of show you guys this.
I'm sorry, what did you call that?
It's a Garden Kit 1000, GK 1000. Yeah, I think mine's in my pocket. We also have a few others on our site. We have smaller, we have larger. This one, I think, it works perfect for high tunnels. And like I said, it does about 10 100-foot rows. So it's a great size. We've also had this approved. If you've gotten a high tunnel on the eQuip program, this is approved to use in that. So I left it in the box because this is the way it'll come to you. It'll be UPS'd right to you. And we'll just lay it down. And it'll come in a bag with directions. It'll come with your fittings. I mean, everything is bagged up. And then you have 100 foot of header hose. This is just a high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene. And it'll handle about 20 to 30 PSI on it. You don't want much more than that. And basically you'll roll this out, and usually what we'll do, and we'll do a demonstration this afternoon at one of those high tunnels. You'll roll this out at the head of your field, and you'll connect some fittings and parts, and you'll pop in some other fittings, and you'll hook it up to your drip tape. And this is 1,000 foot of drip tape right here. So that product you guys are passing around holding in your hand, that's a roll of 1,000 foot of it.
And that's the same that we just looked at?
It's the same as what you looked at, yes ma'am. So, and when I was talking about earlier, when you look at something that's going to use in blackberries, where this is basically the same as that material too, it's just thicker and it doesn't have an emitter built into it. But you can get it with emitters built into it, and that's what you would see in like blackberries or blueberries or pecans, peaches. So, like I said, this is the hose. Set this down here, the drip tape, and then it comes with a nice bag of fittings. And you're gonna say, oh my goodness, all these fittings. But don't worry, we have a little instruction kit that comes with it.
Okay, I have a question. Is that the automatic one that you can set to go, say, drip for 3 hours every other day or something? Is that?
So this kit does not have a controller, but it can be added very easily. And I actually brought a couple controllers that I'll talk about in a sec. Yes, ma'am. So, like I said, this comes, it's got instructions, it's got all your little parts and pieces. That way, if you ever need to order again, you can call us and say, hey, I need a part G out of the garden kit, and we can get that to you. And again, we'll go through all this out there at the high tunnel, but I want to go through these parts real quick just so you're familiar with what they are. This is a filter, and it just has a screen inside of it.
just a small screen that you can take out and wash out. This will keep any sand or particles like that from going into your irrigation system. If it gets stopped up, all you do is take this out, you flush all this out, wash this out, stick it back in there, and screw it back down.
How often would you take it?
Depending on what your water source is, if you're using city water or off your house, something like that, you're probably not going to take it apart and clean it because the city usually does a pretty good job of keeping their water clean. But if you get a busted pipe and sand gets sucked in there, that's when you'll see it. What you'll see is you'll have some pressure issues, and that's where I always tell everybody go back to your and clean your filter first. If you just want to flush it, you can unscrew this cap right here, and that'll flush everything out. You don't actually have to take it apart, but if you seem like it's not doing the deal there, actually take it apart, wash it out. So you would have on your system, the very first thing, and it's on this drawing here, is you would have your filter. This would screw onto your hose bib. This kit is made to hook up to like a garden hose or a hose bib at your high tunnel or your garden. And then you would have a pressure regulator. Now this little device here is going to take whatever your upstream pressure is and it's going to cut it down. This one is set at 10 psi. Our drip tape does not need to operate more than about 12 to 15 pounds of pressure, because if it does, it can actually blow out. But it needs adequate pressure for the emitter to emit the water that it's designed to do.
What do you mean blow out?
It'll actually expand and pop like a balloon if you have too much water pressure on it. Because it's a low density polyethylene, and it doesn't handle more than about 15 to 20 pounds of pressure on it.
So you turn the water on and you kind of wait to see what the flow is before you walk away and leave it?
So with this pressure regulator on there, you can just turn it wide open, and this regulator is going to cut down the pressure to the operating pressure. So that's why we sell that with this kit. So, and it would just screw onto here. No Teflon needed on these because it's plastic threads. And then you would have the adapter piece right here that's actually going to hook to this header tubing. And again, we'll demo this afternoon, or when we walk out there, but I wanted to show you guys this right now. The way this fitting works, this causes a lot of confusion. It kind of works opposite of what you think. You would screw this nut backwards till the barb is completely exposed instead of taking it apart. Most people want to take it apart, slide this over one part, screw it together. It's not how it works. You screw it backwards until it's fully exposed, and then you just take it and you stick it in the tubing, and then you screw this nut down. And that nut, it creates like a jam on there, so it can't come off. And then this would screw onto here. And that's your header line for your irrigation system.
Yeah, can I take a picture of that?
Sure, yes ma'am. And this can screw to your water hose. It can screw straight to your faucet. If you put it on your faucet, I always recommend putting a Y or a couple of manifold, just so you're not taking up that faucet just for this one item.
So the hose goes here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That way where it connect. Now, since I've got this right here, I'll go through that real quick. And if you ever need to take it off, you just unscrew that nut, kind of wiggle it back and forth, and it pops right out. So, I brought a couple of controllers with me because I wanted to show those to you. You could go as simple as this right here, and this works kind of like a kitchen timer. You actually just turn it to whatever minutes you want it to be, and your water's turned on, you can hear it ticking, and it'll turn itself off. So you could set it for 90 minutes, go in the house, or
What's the maximum number of minutes you can set?
the
it for?
maximum on this one is 120. So that would be 2 hours.
2 hours,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
So you have to keep resetting.
So you'd have to keep resetting it every time you turn it on. I always recommend it buying at least this with a garden kit, and I'll tell you the reason why. You go out there, you're checking your plants, you turn your irrigation on, and then you run to the store, and then you come back and you make dinner, and you go to bed. 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, I left the irrigation on. And you flooded the whole place because you left the irrigation on. And so at least buy something like this, like $10. Very inexpensive.
And what's it called?
It's just a manual timer. This one's actually called mechanical hose timer. And you're more than welcome to look at that or take a picture of it. And then you can go up to something like this. This again will adapt to your hose spigot on your house or your water hose. This takes batteries. You can program it, I think, up to 6 hours. This one will actually report to your phone. You can turn it on and off if you're within 150 feet of it. So there's all kinds of, and it's a little bit more expensive, but not, it's still $65, $70, not very expensive. And then you can go up to even fancier than this. I mean, it goes up to whatever you want to spend, kind of like buying a car. You can spend as much as you want. So,
One more question. Will it, do you have one that you can set for, just say,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. This one will do it. And we also have bigger controllers that you can set for days of the week,
Yeah, that's
calendar days, whatever. You could program it to whatever you really want to. And you can even have those hooked to your internet on your home where it reports to your phone or whatever you want to do there too. So if you were away, say visiting someone else, you could turn your irrigation on or off if you needed
So
to.
if you out of the state, you can just go to your phone
Yep.
and tell it water the bed one.
Yes, ma'am.
And it'll water bed one. You can identify.
Yes.
What?
So they have those controllers that can do
Now,
that.
how much is that?
They're going to start probably, I'm going to say $200 or $300,
Okay.
and they can go up to whatever again, depending on how fancy you need. But we could do it for about $300, and you can have it where you, just like you said, you could have zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and you can turn those on, turn them off. You can actually even hook up weather stations to them, so if it rains, it turns it won't irrigate, the whole 9 yards to them. So yeah.
But you could also, if you're just away and checking the weather,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking, but you're away and you're checking the weather and it says it's gonna rain today, you could go into your phone and stop.
That's right. Yes. And that's where, kind of like I was talking about earlier about the soil moisture monitoring side, technology has really grown, especially in the irrigation industry, where you can have all these different devices on your farm where you're accessing it with your phone and making those decisions. I always tell everybody, even with soil moisture monitoring, when you have those tools, don't allow that tool to make the decision for your farm. That's a tool in your toolbox for you to make a decision. Because even as smart as these controllers and as smart as the tools are, boots on the ground is a lot better. And you visually looking at your plants and seeing if they need to irrigate or not. Because we may get a rain and the controller said to turn it off because we got a rain, but it didn't rain at your place. It rained at the other end of the farm.
It rained across the street.
It rained across the street, exactly. So
Chris, I have a follow-up question for that. Also, I think, is the timer on?
this one?
Yeah, we mind shutting the timer off on that? We're picking up the audio from the timer.
Oh, okay.
It's working, but it sounds like a bomb's about to go off when we're listening to it on video. So are there ways that people can monitor the water that they're getting like locally?
have that.
I'm gonna have that. I'm gonna bring this with me. I'll go to a private place and if you hear a boom, then you know what that is. Yeah. Is there a way that people can easily monitor the local water that they're getting, the local irrigation, like right there on their farm? Are there easy ways for them to do that?
So yes, you could use flow meters, which would go right into your system, and it would come, right off of your water source again. So if you were using a well, we would put a flow meter in, and that flow meter would register what you're using, and that would only be what water's passing through that meter on your farm. And those are really nice to have also for troubleshooting reasons. And it's for record keeping. Then you actually know what you used for water on your farm. And there's some conservation practices where keeping those records could really be beneficial for you for doing that. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, with the header hose, you showed how to hook the tubing to it. How do you cap the end?
That's what I'm gonna move to now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And is there a different size? Is that the one size, or can you get the header hose that's a little smaller?
Yes, so they're different depending on the size of the kit is the size of the header. So whatever our flow rate is, we have to design that header line to handle that flow rate. So for this kit, it's a 1-inch tubing, but if you were to buy a small, say maybe 100-foot roll, it could be at like a 5/8 size, about the size of a water hose. So, and then for say you were to buy a 5-acre kit, in which we have those, it would be a 2-inch line. Now it wouldn't be a hard product like this. It would look more like a fire hose, like a flat fire hose. So, all right. To answer your question about capping it, there's a lot of things that we're going to go through here. So, in that kit, there are these. These are called figure 8s. And how this works is all you do is you slide it on there and you bend it over and you slide it back. And that's how you do the end of your header. And it doesn't matter the size of the tubing. That's basically going to be how it's handled. And that's it. And then if you need to flush, all you do is kind of push it down, open it up. You can flush out your lines, fold it back over, and get back off. And since this is such low pressure, again, we're only going to be about 20 or 30 on the, actually we're going to be 10 because of this regulator. It doesn't take much to hold it back from shutting the line off. So that's how that works. That's again, it's called a figure 8.
And would that would work in a high tunnel, right?
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, because the high tunnel, most are like 32 feet wide,
Yep.
and that would work, okay.
Yeah, and most of your high tunnels are going to be 70 to 90 feet long.
Long,
So
yeah.
you're not going to have more than 1,000 foot of drip tape in there because
Okay.
you're only going to get
Right.
5 or 6 rows at most in there.
So this whole planter's kit, I'm sorry, this whole garden kit right there is really good for a high tunnel.
This is the one, if you called and said, I have a high tunnel and I need an irrigation kit, this is what we're going to sell you. And it's designed for that. We call it a garden kit. We should have called it a high tunnel kit, but I guess we wanted to make it more of a general name instead of just a specific. So,
Yeah, I have a kit, and I hooked it up last summer, but I had an issue with the drip tape where it connect, it would just blow out, and then I go out where the garden road would be flooded with water. How do I prevent it from slipping off?
all right, so in the kit, you're going to have a fitting like this. If you've had yours a while, it may have a green handle, but it's basically the same device. And how this works, I'll use my piece of drip tape right here. First off, you want to make sure you get a nice square cut on the end of this drip tape. And you can use anything from a box knife to a pair of scissors, as long as it's sharp and you get a decent square cut. If you cut it at an angle, it's not going to seal, it's going to spray, it's going to pop off. So kind of like that big fitting I used earlier, you want to screw that nut all the way back where that barb is completely exposed. You want to slide this tape all the way down there. You want to keep twisting it and sliding it on there until it's bottomed out, and then tighten it down. And you cannot pull that off.
Okay, so I didn't tighten it enough.
And I would make sure that you cut square too.
But it's still, you know.
You may not have tightened it down enough.
Okay.
And the biggest thing that I see is you don't get a square cut or a clean cut, and that causes issues. We had a 150 acre field that we had drip in, and the guys just went through there with their pocket knife and went like that, and we had to fix about 1,000 leaks because this was not cut square and pushed on there well. So, lesson learned. But like I said, once you screw that down and you tighten, I mean, you cannot pull that off. If you ever need to, like say the end of the season, you want to keep these parts, you can discard this part. You just twist it back the other way, pull it off.
Okay.
Now for the other end, I want to show you how to hook it to the header. I'm going to use my big roll here again. Oh, where is my... There's supposed to be, here it is. Oh, I'm looking right at it. There's this little tool right here. It's just a sharp point on a piece of, that's your hole punch. And what you want to do is once this header's laid out, it's all hooked up, you just come back and you poke a hole in this tubing. And just take this sharp point, there's no real super science to it. And you just want to make sure you're straight with your row, poke a hole. Heard it click, pop it out, take this fitting right here, that barb is going to be a little bit larger than that hole, and you just push it in. You hear it click, there you go. And then you hook it up to your drip tape. And that's pretty much it. And again, since this is low pressure, it doesn't take glue or anything like that to hold it in there.
So you have your instructions there, but do you all have like YouTube or something like that with the step-by-step? Because I am not handy at it.
On the bottom of
step-by-step people.
On the bottom of this is a QR reader. It says watch our video.
There you go.
And it goes through it step by step.
There you go. That's it. That's me.
If I'd have led with that, nobody would have paid attention. So you'll also, since you're poking holes in that header tubing, we've got some mistake plugs, and these are just solid barbs. So if you make a mistake or you need to move a row, you just pop that in there. You just twist this off of the, pop it in the hole.
Oh, okay, so if you make a mistake and
continue.
and need to, because I have tried to reuse, you know, the header, and I've had to throw it away because I couldn't.
Right.
So that can just go in. Oh,
So yeah, you just
cool.
take this off of the stem and you pop it in there. Now I would tell you, if you get a bunch of these in there, they start getting leaks and everything
Yeah, right.
else.
But just
and then you
wanted
just
to-
replace the header. But you've got about 10 times to fix
To
your.
plug the hole.
And then you actually could even get couplers. So if you needed to, you could cut a piece out and couple it back together. And that's what this is, a coupler for your drip tape. So if you have the drip tape gets damaged or you need to put two pieces together, works just like the other fitting. Push all the way on there, tighten it down.
Now those kind of universal, because if I have some drip tape left over from last season, will those couplers fit? I mean, you know, the drip tape.
Yes, ma'am.
Kind of
So
universal.
all the manufacturers make basically it's the same size. It's
Okay.
either going to be 5/8 or 7/8 tape. Most common is 5/8. That's what this is. And so it'll fit from manufacturer to manufacturer, year to year. That doesn't matter.
I don't remember getting that in my kit. Of course, I've had my kit for several years.
The couplers, They may not have been orange, they may have been black. They've kind of changed over the years. This manufacturer decided to put orange rings on there, and they did it for 2 reasons. One is when it's in your field, you know where it's at, so you could take this off and save it from year to year and throw this part away. And 2, now everybody calls and says, hey, I need that thing with the orange rings on it, so they sell a bunch of them.
Okay, so if you have an odd row, can you use those to, send your drip tape in different directions?
Sure, they make
Instead of just
T's and
going
Y's and things like that. Yes, you can do different things to make that work.
Okay.
Or you can use a coupler and run them end to end. One thing to always know is a 12-inch high flow tape. You never want to run more than about 300 to 500 feet. 500 feet at the max for drip tape. 350, 400 is really about where you want to. Because once you get past that, you'll start seeing the efficiencies of the tape just fall off just because of flow restrictions and everything else. But most of your rows are not more than 350 feet long.
Does it matter if your land is on slope?
Good question. All right. So if you're on a slope, it's a good thing. That's a very good question. So always try to put your header at the highest point. That way you'll benefit from the slope. You'll actually gain a little pressure. Unless it's an extreme slope, it's not going to hurt anything. But if you put it at the bottom, you're going to lose pressure, so you may not get the proper water at the top of the hill. So always try to either be at the top or maybe even in the middle to kind of divide that up.
The header, you mean that?
The header, yes.
Okay.
So you want to feed it from the highest point.
Okay.
If it's an extreme slope, I mean like you can't walk it, then we probably need to look at using some different drip tape, pressure compensating, different devices for your field. Haven't run into that too much in this area of the world. Usually you run into that when you get in the mountains and things like that. So, but we can design around it if you have that problem.
So question. So if you're going to be using rain collection, so you'll be using barrels or whatever, does it itself need to have a pump and then like right now I've got rain collecting off the little house I have on my property and I'm manually watering everything right now. But I know I probably need to get a pump for it. So, but my question, I guess, is do you need to have a pump for that when I hook up the micro-irrigation system? It would need to have its own pump.
That's right.
Okay.
So these emitters do need pressure to work.
Okay.
They are rated, you can find what their flow rates are down to about 5 pounds of pressure. They don't want to be more than about 15 pounds of pressure. So if you're in that situation, a small pump just to build pressure and to move that water through your header would work. I've worked in some areas, some third world areas where there was not power. And what we've done in those situations is we built basically water towers, water collections where they're 25, 30 feet in the air. Yes.
So if I, in essence, just raise my tank,
Yes.
I possibly would have the gravity pressure I needed to.
Possibly, yes.
And that would be cheaper?
So here's the kicker to that. Every foot of elevation is almost a half a pound of pressure. It's 0.433.
Okay.
So you would have to, in order to get at least 5 PSI, you would have to have that tank, the bottom of that tank at 10 foot in the air.
Oh, Lord, okay.
So if you're in an area where you can get a pump and you have power, I would say use that. But if you're in an area, like I said, where I've worked in some other areas where there was no electricity at all, we had to build structures 30, 40 feet in the air just so we had enough water pressure to be able to move the water.
Okay.
There was no electricity or pump option in that.
So just using the water from your house, like I had one high tunnel was some significant distance from my house. So I just ran a water line over to that, and that would be sufficient
Yes.
to continue to do.
Yes.
Yeah, because one of the great things I learned is that my tape, I was putting it upside down. I was putting because I thought the water needed
Need
to
to drip down.
Right, so
Yes, ma'am.
you're saying put it up to keep it from getting clogged. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's actually there's a really great point with that too. We worked with a farmer up in the Delta last year who they've been working for a long time to try to get a well installed, and their field was down here, but it was a long run, and they did not have electric to go down there, and putting the well down there and having the pumping plant was going to be very expensive. So they did exactly that. They built the well up top, and then NRCS paid for a pipeline
Yeah,
to
pipeline.
go all the way down there, because running the pipeline was far less expensive than running electric.
Yes.
So they got the electric just to where they could at this stable area, and that's where they ended up putting the well and the pumping plant, and they ran a really long pipeline. I think it's like a quarter mile, down to where the actual field was.
Well, I did the water line because the guy wanted $20,000 for a well, and my
Right.
budget
And
does
on
not accommodate that.
on a high tunnel, you just can't justify that cost.
No.
Yes, I understand. So I'm going to keep moving. I got a few more fittings here. Basically, this is the last fitting that we have here, and this basically works just like the figure 8 does, but it's for your drip tape. So when you get to the end of your drip tape rows, I always tell everybody, run your tape a little long too. Run it a little long in the front, run it a little long in the back, because you may have to cut it and move it and wiggle it around. And also, with the temperature change in that high tunnel from night to day, it's going to snake. And that's a good reason to throw soil back on top of it too, to kind of hold it in place. But when you get to the end of your drip line, your drip tape, what you're going to do is you just take and fold it over, just like you did that header line, kind of make it a sharp point, and you push this fitting over it like this. And you get it to where it pulls back through, and that's all you do. And that kinks off the end of it. And again, if you need to flush, depending on your water source, you may have to flush. All you do is slide this off, open this up, and it'll flush it out. That's it. So that's the kit. I showed you the controllers that I wanted you can use on there. I also brought I brought 2 small injectors that I want to show you guys, because one of the great benefits, especially with micro-irrigation, is being able to put your fertilizers right out through your water system, straight to the roots of your plant. If you can open those for me, that'd be great. Both of these kits are work great with this kit that we have here. A few years ago, we would design everything that called our office. And a few years ago, our engineers sat down and decided, let's start making some kits that are super easy for people to understand, and that's where these things come from. And they've changed a little bit over the years. You've already mentioned some of the fittings that you didn't think. They've kind of changed a little bit because we've learned as we go. But one thing that works really great with these kits, it comes with all these products, is this little canister kit, or canister injector, I should say. And it's a great little product. This works with dry fertilizers, so if you had some water soluble 20 or something like that you wanted to run to your plants, you can use this right here. It comes with all the parts and pieces that you need to run it. Basically, you would unscrew this lid. You would put your dry fertilizer in there. This is a 3/4 gallon one. It's a small one. They make a 1 gallon and a 2 gallon. They look exactly the same, just the container changes. And all it's going to do is just hold more fertilizer is all they do. Matter of fact, the lid on them are the exact same. So you would just pour your dry fertilizer in there. These tubes would hook up. This would hook up to your water hose first if you were using the fertilizer injector. So it would go before your filter and everything go into your header line. And the reason for it is we need the pressure to be able to mix and suck that fertilizer into there. And also you always want your filter downstream from your fertilizer, because if any of that fertilizer was to get into the system, it could clog, so your screen filter would catch it. And then it would just dissolve eventually and go on down. So, like I said, comes with all the fittings, comes with the lines, comes with instructions, and that's probably the simplest little injector right there to use. You can leave it in line, it has an on and off. I always tell everybody, if you're going to leave this out when the winter comes, please take it inside, because this is a plastic jug and it can split and break and freeze. So, simple little injector. I really like that one. I think it's about $60, $70, so not super expensive. You'll be able to put your fertilizer right out. One thing that I always recommend that you guys may have on your hose faucets already is a check valve. This is a backflow preventer. By regulation, they're probably going to make you have this, they will make you have this on your water system, so that none of this fertilizer can go back into your drinking water. It's very important, especially if you're using your house water, to put this on there. And that way you don't have any fertilizer going into your water source, your contaminated water. If you have a well, it's a great bigger version of a check valve. There's different sizes, but this is one that would work great for this small little injector. And again, if you called us, we're going to sell you all these parts that come.
Now, wait a minute, which part goes directly to the faucet?
So you would put this onto the faucet.
That's the check valve.
That's the check valve. Then you would put the fitting to hook to this tank, and then you would have the filter. And all of that is in those pictures, and it's also on that YouTube video that we talked about earlier. And I can open it and put these parts together if you need to see that one, take a picture of it.
Okay.
Would you like me to do that?
That would be great.
Okay, yeah. So, again, you just open up this nice bag of parts.
I'm not going to read those directions, not going to look at that YouTube.
And you would, so this would go on to this would be your garden hose end. This would be for your tank. These lines hook up on these barbs and hook up to this tank. And then this would screw onto your filter,
Okay.
to your pressure regulator, to your header hose. And that's how it would look, is something like that. And your tank would sit like that. So.
It's two hoses.
It's just two hoses. There's a clear one and a black one. I don't remember which one goes where. It says it in the directions. It tells you which. I think the black one is downstream and the clear one is upstream.
So downstream would be what's coming directly out of the hose,
So-
or the,
Upstream would be your water source. Downstream would be your field.
okay, downstream field, upstream water.
Oh, so when you're not using that.
So at any time, upstream will be wherever your water source is. So if someone asks you, is it upstream or downstream? Just always think about upstream is where your water's coming from, down is where it's going.
Okay. Going down.
Right, your water source is where it's coming from.
So if you wanted a little bit bigger injector, say you had a bigger area and you're going to mix something in a 5-gallon pail, again, you've got a fertilizer that you're using that's a water-soluble fertilizer. We have this right here. This is called our Savvy Inject. And this, again, hooks up to the water. It would screw onto your filter just like the other one. And this tube would drop down into your bucket of chemical. And how this works, this has arrows on it. So your upstream would be up here, your water would be moving through. You would adjust these ball valves to force water back through here, and that would create a suction from your bucket, and it would push it into your irrigation system. And
So this one is for liquid fertilizer.
you could use liquid, you could use a water soluble, you know, something that you mix up and break
Gotcha,
down,
gotcha.
but liquid would be fine. I mean, all of that, yes. Just want to make sure if you use a dry fertilizer, it is a water soluble or what they call greenhouse grade fertilizer. If something is ag grade or field grade, that means it's to be cast on the ground and it's not going to break down with water.
Okay.
So we use the same amount of, sorry.
I've
We
got
use the same amount of fertilizer for every crop, right? And just throw it out there, it's all the same?
Oh, sure, yes, no. No.
How do we figure that out?
There's some different equations. Basically, everything, fertilizer is going to be figured out per acre and what the crop needs are. First and foremost, you're going to do tissue sampling or soil sampling or something to that fact, and that'll get you what you need. So if before you plant crops, you're going to do soil sampling, and a lab, a registered lab, would tell you you need to put out so much of this, so much of that, so much of this. They're also in, like especially in fruit and vegetables, there's some guides that will show you how much nitrogen you need for whatever crop. Like for strawberries, you're going to need 60 units of nitrogen. But you'd also go off of those soil samples too, because you may need more than that because your soil needs it. So you do soil sampling in the beginning, you would do tissue sampling after your plants are planted, and then you would figure out the analysis. There's some math to do there. You know, figure out the analysis of your fertilizer, how many pounds you got to put out, and then you would mix that to your acre, and it would pump it through the system. Now, the great thing about a drip irrigation, especially micro-irrigation, it's a pressurized uniform system. So if you mix it up for an acre, each one of these emitters, is, as long as it's at the proper pressure, is going to get the same amount of fertilizer going through that water system. So it's not going to go to the beginning and just dump out on the ground and then not have anything at the ends. There are some I'll use the word soaker hoses that are real popular, and those do not have an emitter, so they're not pressure compensating at any bit. So be careful using those and using fertilizer, because those can just dump water at the beginning and the end, and the middle doesn't get anything. So like Dave, great question, David, because there's a little bit of math to it, but knowing what you need, and then we can help you figure out how much to put out, and then you would mix it into your pail or your bucket, and we would inject it into the system.
And we do that. So are you doing the fertilizer the entire time?
No, a lot of times, most crops, they will do fertilizer maybe once a week.
Okay.
And what we recommend, especially with drip, is run the irrigation for 30-45 minutes before you start injecting. And what that's going to do is get all your lines full, make sure the water's flowing, and then you're going to inject for whatever it takes to run that amount. You know, if you have a 5-gallon pail full and you want to put that out, that's your solution, your water solution. You would just run your injector until that pail is empty, and at that point, I would tell you to run 15-20 minutes after, because that also helps get the fertilizer completely through the system and out of the system, and then shut it off. And that way you don't just run the system all night and you push that fertilizer straight through your soil profile.
So you charge the system.
Yep.
And then you run your fertigation through it, and then you flush the system.
That's exactly right.
And when you do all those three things, charge, fertigate, and flush, all the water in that counts toward your irrigation.
That's correct.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I think I would miss that. Had somebody that told me that, I would say, oh, well, that doesn't count. It's only when I'm fertigating, you know, now.
No.
But all of the water counts.
So that counts. If that process takes you an hour, you can figure out what that flow rate for that hour is, and that counts towards your irrigation. You're bonus throwing a little bit of feed in there with it. So.
Yeah, Chris, would that system going to be used in an organic operation?
It can, as long as it can pass through this screen filter. So if you use organic, just make sure that it's in a good solution and that there's not any sediment or anything like that in there. I've had some issues with maybe some fish scale and stuff like that. It would clog up the filters, but that's why it's very important to have your filter after your injector. So if anything like that gets into the system, it's stopped here and it doesn't stop up your drip tape. But yes, you can use organic. We've used humic acids and all kinds of things to inject into systems.
And also the allowability as far as organic farming.
Yes.
It will be allowed to utilize that fertigation
That's right.
system in
That's right.
that
Yeah,
program.
you can. I have a organic sweet potato farmer in Arkansas, and he uses basically a larger system than this. He changed everything from center pivots to drip just because of the efficiency, and in the end of the year it put a little more money in his pocket and it made sense, and he grows a better crop. He has less non-yieldable, non-marketable products. He has more marketable products is what I'm trying to say.
Well, you said one word there that got my attention over here. That was money.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a second, and Delaney, I don't know what your experience is about this too personally, but about when you're talking about the different kinds of crops and the different kinds of scale, if you're really doing this precision irrigation with the micro-irrigation material, how much opportunity there is to save, if there are general stats about that, general understandings that, studies that have been done, benchmarking that people can understand. If you do this right, you might see this kind of opportunity and savings.
So I can tell you, so again, I'm the sales rep for Arkansas and Southern Missouri, and I've worked with small backyard farmers to large commercial farmers, and I can to just note, a website or a study that you could go and read. I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sure I could come up with some of those, but I can tell you from personal experience, over the past 5 years, I've worked with a commercial watermelon farmer, and 5 years ago, they were using drip, but they weren't using drip efficiently. They were just turning on their well on Friday night, and on Monday morning they turned it off, and they figured that's enough irrigation for the week. But in that time frame, in this last 5 years, we implemented some scheduling, so some controls that turn things on and off at certain times, soil moisture monitoring, fertigating through his drip system. We implemented all these management practices, and we have gone from him farming 400 or 500 acres of watermelons to 250 acres of watermelons and outdoing his yields on 500 acres. So now he's never told me what that puts in his pocket, but he's always smiling when I pull up on his farm. So I equate that as he made money. And every year he tells me it's been a better year than I did before. And this gentleman is 60 plus years old. He's been farming his whole life. He also farms peanuts, cotton, and like I said, watermelons. He's been farming watermelons since he was a teenager, for 50 years. And they've used drip. They were one of the first guys in their area to use drip, but they weren't using any management practices there. They weren't doing soil sampling and tissue sampling and soil moisture monitoring and all these things. And yes, that adds to his day of work, but he's being so much more efficient. He's saving money and he's making more crop than he ever has before, which equals, and he's getting better crop, so his market value is higher and he's making money. He's doing so well that I have like 6 other farmers in the area that are doing the exact same thing, and they're just killing it. And it's in the Boot Hill of Missouri, they're killing it.
So the initial outlay for that cost for him to switch from low efficiency to high efficiency, there was initial
Yes.
cost. So he's now gotten that back. He's farming less produce,
Less ground.
but yielding more produce. So
right.
he's gotten what he spent back.
Oh, yes.
And now he's,
So when I initially pitched it to him, I went to him and I said, give me one field and let's work on it and let me prove. And so I told him within 5 years he'd have his money back. He had it back within a season and a half.
okay.
Now that just market hit. I mean, we just did well. Everything jived. I will tell you, he's a large scale farmer, and that initial cost was daunting. It was scary, but we proved it. And so he went from producing about 40 to 45,000 pounds of watermelons per acre to now he's 65 to 80 thousand pounds per acre. So he's doubled, if not working on the triple side of like I said, he's scaled back.
He has half the watermelon.
He has good watermelon. Matter of fact, this is his hat. He gave me a
Okay.
hat. Yeah. So they've done a great job. Again, I'm not in his books, so I don't know, but I know that we buy, and we've done all of his farm now, and every year we do more and we do more, and we push the envelope a little more, and there's other people in the area that are following. So with management, and that's with any crop. That could be pecans, it could be watermelons, that could be a small vegetable production. You know, just being efficient and yeah, it may take a little time to keep up with your records. It may take a little time to pull your tissue samples, but just knowing what you're doing and doing it correctly is going to save you a lot of money, and it's going to make you a nice crop at the end of the time. So I went over a bunch here. I opened a bunch of things. I look like it threw up irrigation products here, but is there any questions or anything you guys would like to look at or hook up? Again, we're going to walk out to the high tunnel. I'm not sure exactly when, but we'll hook up a lot of these parts and pieces.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd like to add, with NRCS, we provide assistance on our technical assistance, Conservation Practice Code 441, micro-irrigation. So we do provide assistance, as the NRCS does, in order to help install and help provide follow-up, maintenance, and assistance in order to properly operate these type of systems on your farm.
What's that?
So just wanted to let you know.
What was that term you said?
It's 441, micro-irrigation system.
Micro-irrigation, conservation practice.
So if you get approved for the micro or for the irrigation practice, along with that comes some technical assistance?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that really?
We have agronomists on staff at the USDA NRCS office, and you can request that. But that system we provided once you qualify for this system.
And we do that too. That's USDA contracts with us to do a lot of that technical assistance. So
Good thing, Dave.
any of you who have drip irrigation right now, or any other conservation practices from NRCS, feel free to contact us on a regular basis so we can come out and talk to you, visit your farms, and provide you with technical assistance.
So contact NRCS for that.
We're up in farms. So we were up in farms. So this Delaney at Up in Farms, and David at Up in Farms, and that's Dex at Up in Farms. I think we have Delaney's email right there. And we'll make sure you have the phone numbers before you leave. But we can do technical assistance here for that. They are the supplier. Irrigation-Mart's the supplier. But NRCS, they have contracts that you apply for annually.
Yeah.
So the opportunities come up annually for this. You can apply for contracts, and it's based upon a number of factors that they come in. They look at your farm and they kind of rank it based upon your conservation concerns that exist. Do you have issues with erosion or drainage or other kinds of things? And then these practices are actually a response to those concerns. So they identify concerns on your farm and they say, okay, you should use these practices. So often when you get micro-irrigation, it's not by itself. It might be a couple of other related practices with it. It might include a pumping plant, or an irrigation pipeline, or well. Oftentimes those things come in a package, or there may be some other smaller practices that come with that too. And you get contracted with NRCS for that. And that contract includes the money to generally buy like 90% of the materials, up to 90% of the materials for that, or to pay a subcontractor to come in and do the installation if it's a well or a high tunnel or something like that. That's typically how that works. But they would be the Irrigation-Mart themselves would be the suppliers of many of these materials and some of the other equipment that's used for laying the drip tape in the ground and things like that. And they also do provide their own technical assistance, their own technical service. Yes.
So, and we also have design engineering. So if you're required to have designs through these practices they're speaking of, if it can't be done on the local level, we also can do it. There is a cost, a fee for it, because we're the supplier, but we work closely with NRCS and with Upland Farms and these guys to help design those.
Sometimes NRCS will pay for the cost of their design and technical assistance as well, or some percentage of it.
That's right.
Yeah, and we'll cover that. We'll make up the difference, with on our side.
But so does it technical assistance, like for your Upland Farms, or does that include helping you to design it? I'm just talking for small high tunnel, just kind of show you how to design that irrigation.
That's what we're working to be able to have that capacity by the end of the year, to be able to help that on a small scale.
Okay.
But they do this, Irrigation-Mart does this all the time, and it can be done through NRCS, but we're here locally, and this is part of what USDA contracts with us to do, is to come out to your farms and to help you with these things.
So we have to go to USDA to get to you?
No. So Delaney is with, so Delaney spent 30 years with NRCS, about 30 years. I don't want to date him. He spent 112 years with NRCS. He was there as their founding member back before we were even a country. He's part of the bedrock of NRCS, so we're talking about soil. But sometimes he speaks as though he's still part of NRCS, just because he brings that knowledge with him, and he is a big part of the soil surveys that are available to everybody. He did a lot of that research, but he is now working with Upland Farms full time.
Okay.
So we come out and we can help you, and we can reach out to Irrigation if it's beyond their scope, our kin. We'll reach out to Irrigation-Mart and say, hey, Chris, can you help us out here? What can we do here? What do we need to do for this farm?
I almost didn't make it today, but I'm glad I did, because the cost of your drip tape is way better than what I had been directed to, where I'd been getting them. But the other thing is that where I intend to contact you all, I want to make sure I got the right email, because your name, Mr. Delaney, is different from your email. Is that intentional? It's DELANEY, and your email is DELANAY.
That's a mistake. This is a mistake on the email. But
You must be a school teacher.
That's my mistake.
That's okay. I just wanted to be sure.
And my thumbs here, just not typing right. But but actually, you should make sure you get Delaney's phone number before you leave too.
Right,
Okay.
My email's here.
And we're not done, by the way. So I think for those of you who may have come late for the agenda, we just found out lunch is being served at 12:30. So we've got about 45 minutes, a little more than 45 minutes before lunch. So I think now we've kind of wrapped up with this part.
Yeah, sure. Unless there's something somebody wants to talk about or see, yeah.
Well, I think why don't we take like a 5-minute break and have you run to the restroom, stretch, walk around for a sec, and then we'll regroup, and we're either going to do a quick tour or we're going to go over here and set up our demo for the next part. Okay?
Okay.
I hope you do the demo.
Well, we're going to do the demo.
Okay, so we kind of unboxed all that stuff earlier. So now I'm gonna grab some of those components out of the box over here. I'll just drag the boxes of stuff over here so we can go through it. And let me see here, I'm just gonna move it up. Let's see. Like we said earlier, this is our header tubing, and this is what we will hook up to our supply line. In this case, we have this garden hose right here for our supply, which actually runs over to that other house. But if you did not have an injector, you would just hook this filter straight to your water hose. If you have an injector, which I showed you those components earlier, this is where the check valve would go, the injector would go, and then the filter. And we can grab those components and kind of see. So again, this is the check valve. And all of these items have arrows on them. So when you're putting them together, make sure you look for the arrows in which direction. Like I stated earlier, upstream is going to be your source of water, downstream is going to be going to your crop, to your field. So you want to make sure the arrows are going to the crop, where the water needs to go. So if you're going to put an injector, you would put this, and there's an arrow on it too. It's in this little indentation right there. There's a little arrow. You'd screw that on there. And then if you wanted to use our Savvy Jet kit, you would actually have these components here. Would you mind holding that right there? Yeah, thank you. And this adapter right here will get you to hose thread. He's getting close upstairs. And put it on here. Again, arrows. Want to make sure the arrows are going in the right direction. It would screw onto here. And you could have this all supported. Probably would be the best practice inside your high tunnel to build you some kind of shelf or maybe even some brackets to hold this. And then this tube would go on here. And that would just drop down into your bucket of solution of whatever you're irrigating. And in that case, you would put the filter here.
Can you turn that toward the camera so we can see it there too? Yeah, there we go.
So again, probably would be better if this was supported in some way on your wall of your high tunnel. But again, you have your check valve, your injector, a filter, a pressure regulator, and then the adapter to go to the header line. So that's all put together the way it's going to go.
And all that comes in the kit.
All this. So this is our injector kit. That all comes in the kit. And then this comes in the drip irrigation kit, or the green garden kit is what we call it. A garden kit 1000. And there's garden kit 2000, garden kit 4000, and the number just notes how much drip tape you get in the kit. Basically the components are the same, you just get more or less drip tape to the size of the kit. So that's how that all works. Since we don't have this supported, we're just going to lay it on the ground like so. And then you would roll out your header line across these rows here, because we have our beds made right here. So our drip tape would run down our beds, and we'd run our header line across the top of the row here. And we can do that just so you guys can see it. This is probably going to be more tubing than you're going to need if you're on a high tunnel application, because our high tunnels are typically about 30 to 32 feet wide. And this is going to be a 100-foot roll. So, but keep it stored, and you can use it if you you have another high tunnel, or if you get a leak. So what we do is just roll this out. So as you see, that tubing will have a little kink in it from being rolled up. That will not affect anything. Number one, when the water flows through it, it will swell up to the right size. Number two, the heat inside the tunnel will straighten it out. So that won't hurt anything. You will see that when you're unrolling it. So if you wanted to kind of straighten it out, you can. But all right, so we'll go back to this end over here and we'll hook up everything. And all you do is just push that on, screw this nut all the way backwards, push that tubing up on there, kind of wiggle it, push it all the way. There you go. Now tighten the nut down on it. That's it. Something you can do in your high tunnel, if you wanted, you could lay this out ahead of time and kind of get it straight. And you could also take some sod staples or something to that effect and staple it down so that you're kind of holding it straight out in the tunnel. So here we kind of got a few kinks, a little loop. We'll try to get it as straight as we can, but we may have cut it a little long.
We need to. We can disconnect the hose and run it up beneath the wall there.
Yeah, that would probably help with keeping it straight. So while you're doing that, I'll show you how to do this end. So again, as far as the end, it's just what we call a figure 8. You take this figure 8, you slide it over the tubing, and you kink it down like this, and you slide the tubing back, and that's it. That's all. And if you need to flush, you slide that, open the tubing up, it'll flush the water out, bend it back over.
But it doesn't have to be folded too far there.
Doesn't matter. You can make it longer, you can make it shorter. If you get real short, it gets kind of hard to hold it. So I always try to give it a good couple 6 inches maybe, and that way it will stay. It also gives you kind of a good point, like I was talking about earlier with that stake. You could stick that tomato stake or that sod staple, in the end of it right there. Look, there's actually a sod staple right here on the ground. Ask and you'll be given.
What you looking for? I was just about to say. What you looking for you.
See, and that'll hold that. And those sod staples are super inexpensive. Use those to hold them down. And got the water. And so the next thing, we can run some drip tape down a couple of these rows.
So how many of these do we need per tunnel? Just one?
One kit will do 10 100-foot rows. So depending on the size of your tunnel.
Gotcha.
This tunnel has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beds. I'm gonna say this is probably a 70-foot tunnel. So we're gonna use 3/4 of this kit.
Gotcha.
But the good news is if you were to get a bigger tunnel or even add on to this tunnel, you could add on to the kit without buying a whole nother kit. You can just buy more components.
Oh.
Gotcha.
So that's a really good. Now, when you get to a certain size, we'll have to upgrade and upsize your header lines and things like that. But most of the time, on a high tunnel, you can just buy some more row valves and some more tape and hook up to it.
So if you have like 5 tunnels, you could probably get 3 kits and then some add-ons.
Yeah, you sure could.
Yeah.
Or if you called and said, hey Chris, I got 15 50-foot rows. We could add the row fittings in there, but you'd have plenty of the drip tape.
Gotcha.
The length of the drip tape had a distance that it would be functional like over 300 feet. Then you're going to lose some flow.
You'll lose some efficiencies and some flow and uniformity because it's restricted at that point. Most farms and fields do not exceed those lengths on vegetable production. We do see that when you get into like agronomic crops where they have, 80 acre or 100 acre blocks. And at that point, they make drip tape that is larger than 5/8. It's a 7/8 strip tape. And at that time, it can run 1,000 to 1,200 feet, just depending on manufacturer specs. So again, like I said, as this grows, the components just get larger. They're still the same key components, they just get larger. So, since this is a small high tunnel, you are probably not going to have a big piece of equipment to put out drip tape. So I would just tell you get a piece of pipe or a broomstick or something to that matter. Just put it through here and just unroll it and just pull it out. Maybe rig you up a little tripod where you can hold it at one end, or get someone to help you. So I've seen people take like hose reels, water hose reels, and rig it up so they can just set it on this end and pull the drip tape out. Biggest key thing, like I said before, is make sure the emitter is up. There's actually some pictures and notes here that's saying the same thing. Make sure that dripper is up when you install it. So we can lay some of this drip tape out if we like. Another thing, do not use a box knife to open these, because you will cut and damage the drip tape. So just unroll it like I'm doing here. And it'll have a small piece of tape right here. Again, another small piece of tape that is holding that drip tape to the roll. If you use a box knife, you're most likely going to damage. So this would pull out like this over the top, and you could just pull it out down that roll. As you can see, if you had acres on the farm, you probably wouldn't want to do that by hand. That would take you a long time. I always recommend pull you an extra, 8, 10, 12 inches. Do a pocket knife. And just cut that nice and square as best as you can. So you take that hole punch that I showed you guys earlier, and you just grab this tubing. Just take that hole punch, and if you know that tubing is going to lay like that, just poke your hole where it'll lay flat. And you want to make sure you use this hole punch. Don't use like a screwdriver or a pocket knife, because you want, number one, you want it to be a round hole, and number two, you don't want to penetrate all the way through that and cut the other side. I've been on some farms where they used a screwdriver and they had leaks on the other side because they stuck the screwdriver all the way through it. So poke that hole, grab your fitting, and you give it a twist and it pops. You screw that nut all the way back, you slide your tape all the way on there, give it a twist, and you tighten that nut. This brand here has these two orange stripes. That's how you know that's the top. And it's always nice that you can use those two orange stripes to kind of keep it laid flat moving down the field.
You ready for some water?
Let's close off the other end.
Clip that other end.
And yeah, and then we could turn the water on.
Matter of fact.
You would probably have it like where you had it coming out, up now.
Just a concept and do just good.
Yeah. All right, we can drip this one row if we like. So we've got our fitting in. We plugged off the other end with our tape lock fitted with our. Just fold it over, slide it on there, and just pull it down.
So water's coming out now?
As soon as he turns that on, it will. So as you see, every 12 inches, there's an emitter, and there's a little bubble
Water's real.
of dripping out.
So a plant can go on either side of this and still be fine.
That's right, because what's going to happen is you see how this droplet's already growing in size. Eventually, those drops are going to touch, and that whole area will be wetted.
Does the emitter spacing next to the plant spacing really matter?
Not as much as you think it would. If you had a crop that was wide spaced, like 3 foot or 5 foot, you wouldn't want to use a 12-inch spacing, because then you'd be watering an area where there's not a crop. But most vegetable crops, 12 inch is pretty common.
And run this down.
And then what's nice about these, if we had all these rows hooked up, and say you had this row was lettuce and that row was tomatoes, and you didn't need to water your lettuce, but you need to water your tomatoes, you could just turn that row off. And that works really nice when you have a mixed vegetable garden, because you may have squash and everything else, and some water requirements are higher than others.
Which does also mean that you need to make sure that you're good with your calculations about how much is going in there initially.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and so if we know what our flow is, we can figure up how much you need to water for each crop. Because like I said, one crop may take 1 inch of water, one crop may take 2. So as long as we know our flow, we can figure out how long to irrigate for each one.
And that would work the same way with raised beds. So
Yes, ma'am.
like this would be one raised bed, that would be another raised bed, and you could just adjust.
And if you had a super wide raised bed, I'm not sure what your raised bed width's going to
about
be.
like this.
You would run 2 drip tapes just because it's 3 foot wide. Where this, you see this bed, it's about 24, maybe 30 inches wide on the top. But if you got much wider than that, you may want to put 2 drip tapes.
So I've got just from a practical perspective, just a question. I have no understanding of this at all. So if you're doing a couple of different crops in here, a different crop per, per row, typically, are you going to set it up where you say, all right, well, we're going to run the whole thing for 4 hours, but turn this part off for 2, if that's what it is? Or do you irrigate each piece separately?
Both.
Both. Okay. Okay.
Most vegetables, to be honest, are going to be very close in water requirements.
Okay.
But if you had a situation where one vegetable didn't need as much water as the other, you could start the irrigation and then somewhat time in there, come in there and turn that row off. Or you could just water that section and then come back and water the other section at whatever amount of time you need. If you have the allotted time in a day, that's probably the best practice to do it.
Okay.
You know, is water your squash and then water your tomatoes and then water your greens. If you have enough time in the day to do that, and the reason why I say enough time in the day is just for practical reasons. Say we have to water for 8 hours and you've got 4 different crops. We don't have enough time in the day, literally to water. So that might be where you water 2 zones at a time, as long as our source can handle that.
Okay.
So that's where it takes some laying out and some designing when you get into, you know, some different crops, a lot of different crops and different water requirements. It may take some scheduling at that point where things overlap.
Are there any other, I guess, features like that in terms of, you know, water management that are specific to the kinds of crops that you may be growing, in terms of the spacing and the flows and how that works? Is there a better way to lay it out over another way?
Sure. If it was a large area, it would be feasible to actually zone it with different valves, whether it be a manual ball valve or whether it be electric hydraulic valve with a controller, and that way they just automatically stagger and run throughout the day, or you come and turn ball valves on and off where they stagger. And that's why you should plant like things together. You know, don't put a tomato plant and then a squash plant and then something else, because that would be very difficult to irrigate. Do it by rows. And if this was a large farm, you would do it by acres. Most of our large vegetable guys, that's how they do it. They'll have 3 or 4 acres of tomatoes and then 2 to 3, 4 acres of squash and then peppers. And those are watered at different times in the day.
Gotcha. So I might think about setting this up like each high tunnel, if I'm growing crops out there, I might think of that as a field, but I might treat a high tunnel itself as a field.
That's right.
And then within this, if I'm out in the field, I might have blocks.
That's right.
Right? Just have blocks and then beds within it. Here, you know, think of it maybe zones.
Zones, that's right.
You know, so we have a high tunnel and then different zones and the beds within those zones.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
And there's nothing saying that this header has to run this way. You know, if you had it where you want to divide this high tunnel in 4 blocks or 4 zones, we could run that header down the center, and then you could put like a cross in there, and you could irrigate different directions and have 2. It gets kind of super complicated by doing that, but if you end up in those situations, you can. And we have done that on some like greenhouses where they have different trays and different tables and different stages of the crop where they have to irrigate it differently.
So do you find that when people are getting started with this, it's like the more you begin to understand how to control the different parts of this, the more you want to control the different parts of this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we always start out super simple. You know, this is a super simple. And then as that farmer grows and as that farmer develops what it's going to farm or what crops they're going to grow, that irrigation system is going to grow and even get more complicated and probably more high-tech as the farm grows. Yeah, I never want to start off a new farmer or a new client with just super high-tech, all this technology, all this different design, because they get overwhelmed fast. And that's just reality. So we keep it simple and then grow from there. But we could still come in even with a simple system like this and put in maybe tensiometers and soil moisture monitoring.
And what's a tensiometer?
Tensiometer is it's a device. It's a long cylinder tube that has a gypsum block on the bottom of it. And basically it has a gauge and it reads the tension in the soil. So when the soil leaves, or when the water leaves the soil, it creates a tension, a negative tension in there, and that gauge reads that, and that tells you if you're wet or dry. The wetter you are, the less tension in the soil. The drier you are, the more tension.
So we find out about our soil moisture.
That's right. And that's exactly basically how the roots are doing. The wetter you are, to a point, we don't want to be saturated, it's easier for those roots to take that moisture from the soil. The drier you are, the harder it is for them to take that.
So when we're doing this practically, I guess one of the things that I'm taking away from this is that, you know, we set out to do something in a season, and it's kind of based upon a plan, and that plan and say, well, this is how much rain we generally get, and how much we expect, this is how much I'm expecting to irrigate. But like we've had here, we may have, you know, a month where we get 1 day of rain.
Right.
So we're going to have to adjust and having a tensiometer in here. So you're looking at your soil moisture and really actually understanding, all right, it's getting dry now. We need to bring some water in. And you can really monitor that and have much more control over that, even during drought conditions.
That's exactly right. And even to the point, that's why when we design a system, we design worst case scenario, the driest. Because like I can state some numbers from Arkansas, because that's where I live. In Arkansas, we get about 60 inches of rain a year. But we get those from November to April. We're not growing any crops November to April because it's too cold and too wet. In the summertime, we don't hardly get any rain, and that's where we need our irrigation for those crops. So you can never just bet on rain. That's a really bad practice of farming, is betting on rain. It's always a design a system for that worst case scenario and hope that you don't have to have it, but you're going to end up using it.
There's two other observations. What in soil health, the mulching, whether it's natural vegetative mulch or whether it's yard landscape mulching, then that helps extend the need for irrigation, because you're going to retain that moisture for longer periods, and then it may not rain for 2 weeks, but you're going to have to extend that opportunity where you need to irrigate, because you still have that moisture retained in your soil because of that layer of mulching. Like we said, what you're still going to have some retention of that moisture, so that would reduce the need for water inputs. So that would reduce the amount of water that you would have to use in order to keep your crops growing. Okay, another thing, I guess the optimum time is to irrigate is during the daytime, because you got the sunlight effect that's really drawing water through your plant system, and then it's going to need more moisture to continue to be healthy and retain and keep from withering. Okay, nighttime, then that would not be the optimum time to irrigate, because everything kind of reduces its need for energy, growth, and activity. So the nighttime irrigation, that's not a really recommended. It's the daytime events that you would really apply your irrigation activity, because you have your interaction with your plants and your sunlight that's drawing that water movement throughout your system there and stuff. So those are just two
sunlight
observations.
activates the need in the plants for the water, and if it's not there, then it's problematic. And if it is there, then they're going to use it, and it's going to be, that's the best time and best use for it. But at night, it won't have that activation.
Yeah.
So what you have is what we call evapotranspiration. It's just like us. We're standing out here and we're sweating, right? We're perspiring moisture from our body. The plants do the exact same thing. So you have evaporation just from water on the surface. The sun is going to evaporate that. Evapotranspiration is the plant actually releasing that moisture back into the atmosphere.
That's the word.
And so, like Delaney was saying there, when the temperatures are hot, the plants are going to take that water because they're sweating just like we are. We want to drink water when we're sweating. At night, when that temperature drops, that plant goes to sleep just like we do at night. It shuts down. So that need for water to keep that health up is not there. Now, sometimes we do end up in situations where we have to irrigate at night to catch up, because our temperatures are so hot and our irrigation system maybe not be able to put out enough water. But that's a very slim chances that happens. And when we do that, we don't just excessive irrigate. We just minimal put out what we think we need to, or what we need to put back into the soil. And the only way to know that is with moisture monitoring. When I wished I had a graph or something I could show you guys. When you look at moisture monitoring, there's a fill line and there's a dry line. And this is, and I always call it keeping it between the ditches.
And so you want to keep your water between those ditches. You don't want it saturated. You don't want the field just sitting in water, but we don't want it to where it's at wilting point.
Right.
And so what you would have is a graph, and when you would irrigate, that line should move up, and then that plant will take water until it gets back down to a point until that irrigation hits again. And so that's what you see during that daytime, is that water leaving the soil, and at night it'll stop. Well, if we don't irrigate the next day or whenever we have to irrigate, it's just going to start from that point and go back down to wilting. So that's why we have to kind of fill it up, let it drain down. Fill it up, let it drain down.
Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that part?
The information.
We need to see the video and put it back up there a few times. And so one question I have is kind of a follow-up to all that is, when we're doing this, just kind of from the beginning of the process to the end, what kind of record should we keep within this, and you know, what kind of information should we track, and why is that important?
Sure. So the very first thing I would recommend is having a flow meter on your system. And a flow meter is just like a water meter on your house. It has a dial gauge on there, and it's going to keep up with your water usage. So it would be always great, number one, to know what days of the week you're irrigating, how long you're doing it, and then back that data up with your flow meter. The water, you can start from the beginning and you can count how many gallons you put out for that day. If you don't have a flow meter, you can take and figure up how many emitters, and we can, a lot of math, and we can figure up the same thing and be really close. But a flow meter is a lot easier just to walk over there. You know, I started today at 100 gallons. When I turned off 4 hours later, I'm at 500 gallons. So we used 400 gallons of water.
Is one of those meters on those timers?
There is not one built onto a timer right now. And to be honest with you, on a small water hose, there's not really a super efficient one for a flow meter on that small of a scale. There are some, when they get larger, they get a little bit easier to determine and use. If you're on a small scale, like using a water hose, the easiest thing to do is just figure up your drip tape and some quick math, and we could tell you how many gallons you used.
You know what? I think one of our goals is to create a tool online, so that you will be able to go online and enter in like how many emitters, right? And we'll be able to output that information for you, so you'll know how much water you use.
Okay. That'd be great, because then you could put in your row foot and the whole thing, put in a little bit of data, and it'll pop out, and that'll be super close to what it actually is. So,
Yeah, I also know you said, Chris, the infiltration is going down, and we see that as each interval. Okay, now that's infiltration. Okay, the percolation and the permeability is when these wet spots meet. Okay, then that means all the pore spaces have been satisfied. You have water that's continuous throughout this whole area, and that's when you have a field capacity, and that's when you measure, so that should be optimum time for the roots of being satisfied with collecting water or drawing up water, that they're not in strain, they're not in stressing. The water is there. But you have to saturate, and right now it's infiltrating. But as far as down below, what we were talking about earlier on, right into the rooting zone, then that's going to take a while for it to be satisfied, based upon your soil type, based upon your soil material, sand, silt, and clay content. Loamy soils versus clay soils versus sandy soil. So you have to be, that's an observation. Now, you, like Chris was saying, and David, but you have instrumentation to prove that also. If those two things line up, your observation and your instrumentation, then you knowing what you have to work with. And that's where it is good to collect data, record the observation and your data that's being collected, to know what's optimum for your field. You should know more about your land area or your site more than anybody once you get it. And then you're the expert. You become your expert on your ground. So that is something where we want to be as being a proficient and efficient farmer or producer, is knowing your ground, knowing what you have to work with.
That's right.
So that's where we are aiming to achieve that level of competence. And I see it right now, that's what up in farms and working with the other groups here, units, is what we are trying to achieve. And then we'll be up working with the big wheels, they doing the same thing. We just trying to get to that point, knowing what we have to work with, you know, how our soils behave with the water inputs and how it correlates with our operation, whether we're a specialty crop producer or whatever type producer we are. So we'll have that information available and handy, and we'll know how it functions. And we won't just have to guess anymore. We know what we have to work with. And that's when you become a proficient producer and operator.
I have one other question about the raised bed in here. Okay, so if you put a raised bed there, you got, you know, how does that go into a raised bed? How do you put this on the outside? Does this go over the raised bed inside?
So if you were saying if you had a raised bed built here instead of a row.
Right, because it's laying down on the ground.
At that point, you would have what we call a micro tube, or some people call it a spaghetti line.
Okay.
You would run that tubing up and turn over, and your drip tape would hook up on top of
Got it.
So you would run tubing up into that bed.
Okay.
So and if I'm the plant, you know, where am I in relation to this? You may have mentioned that before, but
So most of the time, it's really not going to matter exactly. What you're going to have is, if you're planting something like tomatoes, you're going to plant it right down the center of your bed. So you're going to want this tape just off to the center, because we can't put it center, because if you come through and poke a hole to put a tomato plant, you're going to cut that tubing. So we put it just off to the center. And as you see, what I wanted to show you guys, you see these circles are almost, they're getting closer to touching each other. You look all the way down. If we were to leave this running for 3 or 4 hours, we'd come back and there would just be a wet strip all the way down. So you want this tape, you don't want the plant, you don't want it against the plant, but you want it close enough to where those circles are going to encapsulate that plant's root zone.
2 or 3 inches.
2 or 3 inches off
of it,
of
so
it, yeah.
It'll hit the root zone.
2 or 3 inches off to the side, and it doesn't matter if it's right or left. If you're using a machine to lay it, what you'll find out is you'll be on the right on going down and you'll be on the left coming back. So that doesn't really matter. It's just making sure that you're not going to be in that area where you're going to dig a hole to plant that plant, but you're close enough to it. You don't want this over here and the plant over here, because it's going to struggle to get water. Right. So you want this 2 or 3 inches off. Usually I would, like we talked about earlier, just take a shovel, make a small trench, lay this tape in it, then throw your dirt over it. That'll help keep it from snaking with temperature. It'll also protect it a little bit from any rodent damage or anything like that. So
I do find that fascinating personally, just that the proximity here, it makes such a big difference. This is why doing this is precision agriculture.
Right.
You know, you would be practicing precision agriculture. 6 inches over here is too far, you know, right on top is obviously bad, but 2 to 3 inches, and that's what we're talking about, to hit the root zone, you know, and the technology, the science is there to support you with that.
And also, in addition to that, David, what we said surface irrigation this morning. You have flooding your trenches, whereas the roots had to come out and then try to come out where the water was. But now you got direct.
Yes.
And then your roots can go down, straight down. They don't have to try to go down and go out to try to get to the water source. They can go straight down, and that's what you want. Roots going straight down, your plant's going straight up. That's what you want to have.
And then when you're fertigating and you're pumping fertilizer, you see that bubble right there. That's where your food is for that plant. It's not over there. It's not over here. It's going right where that root system is.
Gotcha.
So that's what's nice about being able to fertigate. And on top of that, you can spoon feed that plant instead of coming in here and broadcasting a bunch of fertilizer for the whole season, which we know will be here in the beginning of the season, and it'll slowly fade away as we get rains and everything else and erosion. Instead, every week you could put a little bit of fertilizer out. Like Delaney said earlier, it's like just baby food and a baby, just small bites, instead of just pouring it all on there and hoping that it makes it to the end.
Have any of you tried that before? Just you know, fertilizing at a smaller rate, more periodically. Okay. Does that sound interesting at all?
More efficient.
More efficient, yeah. Okay.
So we've done some studies with some larger farmers, and what we found kind of a misconception. A lot of people think they're going to use less fertilizer. What we found is we didn't use any less fertilizer, but we had better yields because we were more efficient with that fertilizer. So the farmer did not save the money in buying the fertilizer, but the farmer made money because he had more crop to harvest. Right. So that's where that's where the savings was.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah. So it wasn't, and even with micro irrigation, that's kind of a common misconception. People would think that you're not going to use as much water. No, that plant still has that requirement. We're just able to be more efficient with what we have.
Right. Gotcha. Well, I think we're right at the end here, but I want to make sure that if anybody else has any more questions, that you can get asked and answered. And now's the time to do that. I know it's been pretty thorough. It's been turn the spigot on for today.
We may have dumped the whole food on there.
That's right. Yeah, you're irrigated for the season now. Your brains are, but this will all be online. But would really like to give a big thanks to Chris for being out here today with us. Coming down from Arkansas, going all the way to Louisiana to bring the stuff, and then back up here, and then Delaney for working with us today too. So and thank you guys for showing up today again in the heat and participating and sitting in for the video. We really appreciate everything y'all did.
Hello, my name is Nadine Randall, and I am from Kruger, Mississippi. And this has been an awesome training today because I learned a lot. I've been doing the drip irrigation, and I learned that I was doing it putting the tape upside down. That was one thing. And I learned about Irrigation-Mart, and that I didn't know that NRCS provided technical assistance. So this was a really good and worthy trip today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Violet Keys. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. My urban farm is Synergy in the Garden, and I'm here today taking part in the micro-irrigation production workshop, which has been really great. I've learned a lot of things, and both of the speakers gave really good information that I can take back to my farm and implement. As a beginning farmer, all of these workshops that they've done so far that I've attended have been really pivotal in encouraging me and giving me the right tools and information that I'll need to be successful on my farm.
Hi, I'm Rosie Payton, and I'm the owner of R&L Greenleaf Farm and an urban farm in Brandon, Mississippi. I came today to learn about the micro-irrigation. I'm a new farmer and trying to get some more information about exactly how to irrigate. And so today I did learn a lot about how to place the irrigation system, how to set it up, and I am very glad to learn that. And I'll also learn about the technical assistance that's available. It's been a great day. This is my first time attending one of the workshops, but I look forward to learning more.
Hi, I'm Shelby Liggins. I'm representing Liggins Farm in Terry, Mississippi. We began on the farm, started about a year ago. This is my second workshop here at learning about micro-irrigation, excuse me. And it's just another notch under my belt because we plan on expanding from cattle to farming.
So what's the most important thing you learned today through this?
One of the most important things I've learned was the technique of the irrigation, also the technology of as far as you don't want to oversaturate your farm, and how to water your plants without oversaturating or underwatering it.
Do you feel like after today you're going to have a little bit of a different approach with your water and your irrigation on your farm?
I will. A bigger approach, a lot better understanding of it. I think it'll save me a ton of money. And the best practice is always saving money and saving time.
I'm Kathleen Ferris from Choctaw, Mississippi. I work with the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. And I came here not knowing anything about irrigation, so I've learned a lot. as far as how to set it up, where to start, and what I should be aiming to do.
What would you say your biggest takeaway is from today so far?
My biggest takeaway would be I really want to set up drip irrigation now instead of sprinklers.
Hi, my name is Jangela Durr. I'm a new tree farmer. I guess you would say our tree farm is Durr Family Tree Farm from Prentice, Mississippi. It's only been about 2 years since we've been doing tree farming, and I have not yet gotten into the crop side or horticulture side of farming, but coming here today has been a blessing because I learned things that I didn't know as far as making the job easier, the different organizations that are involved in making the task easier for us as farmers.
Yes, I'm Sherry Gaddis, and actually I was a student here at Piney, so I have a little chit chat with the students. I retired a few years ago. I decided to move back to my family farm. I'm just here learning, trying to get little tidbits. I'm concerned about the climate. We have a 1,000-gallon water tower at the house, so I'm just trying to get some tips on irrigation. Just noticing the climate change, it seems to be a real challenge having a drought. So I'm just trying to get some ideas how to implement the ideals of using irrigation on my farm, because it's going to be really critical for people to learn how to grow crops. You know, it's going to be just really critical. You go to the grocery store and it's very limited of what you can get. So we're going to have to go back and just try to rethink on just how to survive growing crops. So that was my ideal, moving back to the farm. A lot of people take for granted going to fast food, going to the grocery store, but it's not always guaranteed that those things going to be there. So this is a learning experience, and I have learned quite a bit here. So I will be calling, it's not Peter, Chris, just to get some idea on using the fertilizers, use the different equipment with the irrigation tapes, and et cetera, et cetera.